What is going on, everyone? And thank you for coming to our first official episode, because we recorded last year and never posted the episode.
Yeah.
But this is our couples podcast, Beyond Dating. My name is Tyler, and I'm joined by my wife, Sarena.
Yes.
Really, what we're doing here is we're just kind of talking about struggles that we've gone through, things that we're working through, faith, just things that are on our heart that we want to talk about. And so this being the first episode, we're trying to figure out where to begin. And so we're going to pull from a devotional that we have. And I think it fits for what we're talking about, what we're trying to do. Sarena has a really devotional, but I'll read it to her. And so this is actually from a couple days ago, but it's two are better than one. And this is from Ecclesiastes 4, chapter 4, verse 11. Also, if two lie down together, they will keep warm. But how can one keep warm alone? Are you feeling cold winds blowing today of stress, conflict, or headache? Your marriage is a blessing when you offer the warmth of our love and support. Yet your pain is, I can't read today, yet your pain is compounded if your partner is absent and distant in your struggle. How does your life feel cold to you today? How does your life feel cold to you today? If you are experiencing rejection or loneliness, build in extra time for companionship together. Does your job feel like a dead end or insufficient to meet your needs? Praise each other's talents, strengths, and hard work. Pray for God's provision of a rewarding career. Are you struggling through physical sickness or limitations? Serve each other and create room for rest. Have you lost a person, place, or possession that meant the world to you? Offer comfort and understanding through the grieving process. Your relationship is a gift from God to keep you from suffering hard times alone. Turn your hearts and attention to one another in all you're going through. Man, this is kind of wordy. Praise God for the warmth you can share in every situation. And then the prayer at the end is, Lord, thank you for giving us encouragement and love through our marriage. Keep us close to you. Keep us close to you and each other in hard times. Which I think fits perfectly with what you and I have been going through.
Yeah, there's a couple things that came to mind.
Okay, go ahead.
When it was kind of talking about, talking with your partner and honoring like their talents and strengths.
Sure.
I don't think it fully said it, but even talking about their weaknesses too. It kind of reminds me of the stint that we went through of I was trying to replace you.
Last year.
Yeah, and I wasn't trying to intentionally. It was a very subconscious thought because I felt very neglected as a wife and it didn't feel good. But then like talking to you about it, it like slapped me in the face. And it's also what we've been talked about as well, like being unequally yoked, both with as partners and as friends too. It's not easy to really admit, as our coach used to tell us, to admit the small things,
Sure.
The tiny things out loud.
Sure. No, like that makes sense. I mean, I kind of want to bring some clarity without going too clarity.
That's fine.
But there, about over a year ago, I was working a job where I had to get up super early in the morning, be there by like 5 in the morning. So I was getting up at like 3 or 4. I mean, I'd have to go to bed super early, meaning Sarena was by herself. And at the time, our friend, who will remain nameless, I guess, was coming over. Huh?
Carl with a W.
Carl with a W.
Oops.
William with a W. Anyways, he would come over to hang out, and then I would go to bed, and then they would stay up talking. He had no problem with it. I mean, they were already close friends, but through that, Sarena was unintentionally like I wouldn't say, I don't like the word grooming,
I hate
but
that word, but it's more like unintentionally replacing you
yeah.
with someone that was there, kind of thing.
And so it put a strain on us. And soon after that, I left that job. But I think after that, we got better. But it definitely was a strong part. But that wasn't the only part, I think, in our marriage that we've had issues like of neglect. Or, one person feeling one way over the other. But
yeah, there's been a time or two, and that's happened with me with an old place I used to work at.
yeah, it was kind of, I mean, I didn't try to replace you with anybody, but it was more of,
You were neglected as a husband, and then I would take it out on you, but then I would unintentionally like make you feel worse because of like how the situation was, of feeling like I had to provide.
yeah. And like you felt like you had to provide, and you felt like I was like getting to go do everything I wanted to do. When in reality, that's not how I felt at all. And I remember like you and I got into a fight, pretty bad, where it was your day off. Like that's how bad this place had you. It was your day off.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about? It was. We had rehearsal that night.
Oh yeah.
And you were so afraid you were gonna get in trouble because you weren't supposed to be there, but you thought you'd still get yelled at.
Yeah.
If you weren't there.
It was a very much an anxiety grip that like, because it had happened in the past of like, well, why weren't you here? Why didn't you finish? And da 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 da.
And so we got into a fight.
Oh yeah, because I threatened to walk home, and it was like several miles.
Yep. I think Thorne came and got you.
He did.
Yeah.
He came and got me and was like, "Hey, buddy, friend,
Cause
what's going on?"
Because your mom also was like, "Where you think you going?" Because and that happened pretty recently too. We had another issue.
And I was like, "I'm gonna walk home to Georgia. I'm gonna go to Zebulon." And my mom was like, "Where you think you're gonna go?" And I was
How
like,
long you think you're gonna last? That was what she told me. She's like, where does she think she's gonna go, and how long she thinks she's gonna last?
It was 9 days. It was 9 days. You know.
Oh man, no, it's. I think it's a good starting place because the thing is, you and I have had a weird relationship from the beginning.
Yeah, we have. It's very unique. It's not weird.
It's weird.
Okay, it's weird because we're weird, but it's more unique than anything.
Like we moved in together pretty early on too.
Well, to be fair, let's clarify.
I was almost there.
Well, I'm sorry.
Clarify. Go ahead.
But like I pursued you first, so that was kind of a big deal. And then on top of pursuing you first, my mom and I were about to be homeless with other things going on, and then you talked to your mom, and my mom and myself moved in with you and your mom, which then my mom moved out, and then we stayed there. We got engaged at your mom's house too.
Yeah, that's a long story as well.
Oh, yeah.
For another day.
And then we moved in by ourselves like a year and a half after that.
Right.
Because we were getting married like the next year.
But there were a lot of, I hate this word because I don't quite, I understand what the word means, but I hate when people use it. Like Will Smith used it when he was trying to explain why he slapped Chris Rock. He's like, well, you got to understand there's some nuances and things of that nature. Like, it's like nuances about slapping a man on live TV. But there
were some definite quirks. Like, this is going to sound maybe personal, but you kind of got to know, even before we lived together, you got to know my medical problem.
That's what I was getting at.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
No. You're good. We're just reading each other's minds. But that's what I was going to say. Like, we weren't sexually active, but we got to know each other. Or at least I got to know you personally that way because I had to take care of you.
Yeah.
When your medical issues did flare up. And we're not going to go into that. But
let's just say it was very personal, very private, and it's now an autoimmune disorder, but then we didn't know what it was.
Which rarely ever shows up anymore.
Yeah.
It's at this point basically gone to go get milk and it's never coming back. But no, we've been close, and that I think that's helped our marriage, but it's also dampened it too. because we've been so close from the beginning that now it's hard for us to separate for too long.
Yeah. Like you hated going to work when this last job that you were at, you hated going to work, and it was just miserable for you.
I had bad separation anxiety, and then when you went out to Iowa for 2 weeks,
that was killer.
It was bad.
Mm-hmm.
And so there is a codependency there, but I don't think it's toxic. I don't think it's anything wrong. I just think, again, we went at this relationship different than most people.
Yeah.
And
most people meet at a bar. Most people meet in class, or they just like, hey, let's text, let's go get coffee.
You meet in church. I mean, we met in college. So the way we met isn't the thing. It's just how our relationship blossomed. Close. And it's just a very interesting thing. But we've had ups and downs, and some major ones within the past few years. But I think we're at a level now, outside of finances. But I think we're at a level now where I think, besides the occasional, like, tired fight, as I call them, whenever like neither one of us are making sense.
Because both of us are on sleep.
Yeah.
We are past the point of no return, and our eyeballs are like 1, 2, and I'm tired.
Last night was an example of that.
Yeah, it was a tired fight.
But besides that, I think we're pretty strong. I mean, we had a hiccup earlier this year, and that was the whole, I'm walking home to Georgia. And it's like, why?
It's still only going to take me 9 days.
I can tell you right now, I don't even remember what that fight was about.
I don't either.
I don't. Like, all I remember was crying. Because you were like, I'm really leaving. And you packed your little cat bag.
I did.
And you started walking.
I didn't get very far.
And then I wouldn't answer the phone. And so you came on back.
Yeah.
And then we talked it out. But again, I don't remember what the fight was. And most of the time, I don't remember what our fights are about after a little bit.
Same. It kind of reminds me of the time that you pulled
the knife?
You pulled the knife, but thank goodness, like, it was in the middle of the
night. I did not
night.
pull the knife on her.
No. He pulled it on himself, and because we were having one of those fights, and it was dark, and so he goes to the kitchen.
I went to go prove a point.
And he thought he picked up the sharp one, and it was the very dull, like...
It's a bread...
A bread
knife,
cutter,
yeah.
But it's not like the sharp one. It's the really weird...
It's got weird, like, ridges in it.
Yeah, and he pulled it out, and then we turned the light on, and it was like, God was like, I switched the knife, boy.
Yeah. But that was a really hard time for us, like, because...
Yeah.
Oh, the fireworks, man.
Oh, yay.
That was close. But no, that was a tough time, because we were dealing with... That was COVID. That was COVID. We had just moved into our newer apartment. This was the one before we're currently at.
Yeah.
We were dealing with knowing the fact that we both had anxiety and depression. I think is around that time. Maybe it was right after when we learned.
It was about that time, yeah. Because then it made sense on why things spike all the time.
Right, and so like while you're dealing with your anxietal depression, I'm dealing with my angry anxiety, and it's like I can't get through to you, so the only way to get through to you is to harm myself in those moments. And it was like, we're not okay.
No. We even like took up, that was about the time we also like took up counseling with Sarah. And
no, Sarah was just last year.
Well, she's about 1.5 years at least.
We joined Rise last year.
Oh, yeah.
So I guess it'd be 1.5 years at this point. You're right. But we did go to marriage counseling. And then we both went to individual counseling, and we learned a lot about ourselves, I felt like, in some way. But the biggest thing, and it was today, Serena told me today, that she feels happier because we're getting back into the spirit, getting back into church and whatnot. And I'm trying to bring it back around to that.
Yeah.
And I think that's where it's like, we're also reading this devotional. I don't know if you're going to keep reading because it's a men's devotional, which we learned today.
I may not finish reading that one, but I do have a women's one.
But it's 1 + 1 equals 3. And it's about having friendships and relationships, but God being the center of that. And I think for us, that's what we missed for the first 4 years of our marriage, was there wasn't an active
There wasn't the God pillar.
Right. We talked about him. We both had faith, but we never brought him in. Because anytime, we talked about this too, anytime I wanted to bring him in,
I would.
you put up a wall.
Yeah.
And you're like, I don't want this.
It's hard to want to be around fellowship, which we talked about already, but like being around fellowship when you've already been shunned by the people who are supposed to be of God, which is why I never had a problem with God and why we would always talk to him about it. But it was just hard. But it feels better now. And kind of also going back to something else we talked about is earlier, we mentioned unequally yoked. Well, it's also mentioning like maybe some of the like acquaintance friends who don't need to be back into our lives.
Right.
There's that cycle of like, okay, I'm putting them in their corner, and I'm gonna put you guys where you need to be.
Michael and I talked about that on his podcast today about putting those friends in kennels.
Yeah.
I mean, like, that's where you staying, bud. I'm gonna come over there and pet you, but you staying in there.
Yeah. Because you need to. And living up here, I've learned that it is different.
Yeah.
And I've had to learn how to put up boundaries. And I've put up boundaries with the wrong people, including God.
Yeah.
And I have as you said, I've let the villains in, but I can't let the heroes in.
Yep. So, I mean, like I said, we're in a better place now. I think in our marriage. You good?
Yeah, okay. Sorry, didn't want to yawn the mic.
We're in a better place now than I think we were at the beginning. And there was something, I remember your dad said this.
Adoptive father.
When I referred to, I refer to Bruce as dad, and when I refer to Lewis, I'll say Lewis.
That's
dad.
fair. But
just because I've had more interaction with Bruce, you've had more interaction with Bruce.
Yeah, Bruce is practically my father. He's the father who raised me on earth. But I have a father besides God who has watched me since the time he has passed.
Yeah, her biological father passed away whenever she was young, and so I said this on my solo cast too, but this man who was her neighbor basically stepped into that role ever since she was a child. So we refer to him as his dad as well. So she's got two dads.
Yeah, I was blessed with two dads.
But Bruce, I remember before I asked you to marry me, or maybe it was right after I asked.
Oh yeah.
I called and I asked for his blessing, and he said, and he's a very cautious man. As I've gotten to know him throughout the years, he's a very cautious man.
Yeah.
And he wants you to make sure you're making the right choice. And he told me we're gonna need counseling. He told me that we should seek counseling before we do anything. And what happened? We were Samson and we didn't listen. I bring that up because that's what I'm reading right now. We didn't listen.
Nope.
But instead of getting our hair cut off, we went through trials. I also remember coworker Randy doing that star chart, and he was like, "She's a Pisces, you're a Leo. She's gonna pick on you. She's gonna make things hell." And he said, "But you guys, other than that, you guys should be fine." And I just kind of brushed it off, and I'm like, "Well, we have had issues. We've had our fights, we've had our disagreements, and a lot of it, to be honest, a lot of it has always been outside problems."
Yeah, there was the finances, so outside of our marriage, there was other people, family members that were outside of it.
Like, the thing is,
even an animal as well.
That's not his fault.
I
will say that's not his fault. That's
not
just,
his fault, but
we're in an apartment and he just didn't work.
Well, but it was like adding to it is my point.
When you have anxiety and the dog has anxiety, it doesn't fix the anxiety. It makes the anxiety worse.
It creates a ginormous wrecking ball.
But I mean, we rented a house. We tried to help a family member out. Rented a house. It didn't work out. Caused more financial strain. Lost my job. Was on unemployment. COVID happened. Got a job. Had to get a roommate. Wasn't making enough money. Roommate, loved him to pieces. It just wasn't working all the way around. Roommate left. We moved. Friendships were ended around that time.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And then we ended up in the apartment that we're in. And then it's been kind of up down a roller coaster here. But I think really the worst of our problems ended before we got here.
That's fair.
There's one main problem that happened while we've been here. And that besides we talked about at the beginning, which was the whole, replacing with a friend. That was an internal thing. That was a neglect thing.
Yeah. But
there was an issue with an outside force who was kind of taking over our lives because I'll call him the snake. We'll call him Randy with an R. K. Randy with a K.
Randy with a K, okay.
Yeah. Randy with a K was a snake who promised a lot.
Oh, that snake. Yes. Promised way too much.
Promised a lot, but in exchange added so much stress and so much anxiety and so much burnout that also had a tear in us as well. And so I think that is where it ended as far as
outside forces.
Well, yeah.
Like major outside forces.
Yeah, and then now it's really more finances. It's more finding ourselves and realizing we don't really want to work for just regular companies. We want to make a difference, and we want to do things that we're going to enjoy and be happy and be fruitful with. And I think that's why we're happy today. I mean, besides some little fights, again, like I said, the sleep fights.
Those are never fun. Because the mean one comes out, the wall comes up, and it's like everybody is wrong.
Yeah.
And I'm not usually the type of person of like, you're wrong, I'm right. I'm like, you're right, I am wrong. I'll take that.
You're wrong, I'm right. You're big, I'm big. You're little.
And there's nothing you can do.
Yeah.
The mean one comes out, and then it's all just like, oh boy.
But no, I going back to the devotional on it. I think. Even though it's only been about a week since we've really jumped, well, I'd say maybe 2 weeks since we fully been. We started watching Elevation. I want to say we started watching Elevation about a month ago.
About I want to say 2 weeks to a month, so about in that time frame.
3 Sundays at least.
Yeah.
So
not quite a month.
Yeah, it was 3 Sundays, and then we went to our new church, Abundant. Last week, so yeah. So we started watching Elevation, started feeling the spirit in the house, and then just this past week we've jumped into YouVersion and reading the daily devotionals together and really jumping back into the Word. Finally found I want to say it's only been one full visit, but I already feel welcomed in this church. So I want to say it's a home church, but but that's just how I've been feeling lately. But even with that week of time, we feel happier, even though we're going through a stressful time right now.
Yeah.
Even though you've got the job at the preschool, you haven't started yet, and you're trying to get voice acting going. I'm trying to get this YouTube thing going, as well as trying to find work. And so we're at a in between phase. Like we're struggling. Family's trying to they're having to help us. Our neighbor came over and gave us food, which we didn't ask for.
She blessed us with that.
Which is crazy because it brings up the Galatians verse that we read before we started. Do you remember what it was?
Galatians 5:13.
Let me pull it up real quick.
I don't remember the exact verse or what it said, but I do remember.
Right here. So Galatians 5:13. This is the NLT version. For you have been called to live in freedom, my brothers and sisters, but do not use your freedom to satisfy your sinful nature. Instead, use your freedom to serve one another in love, which is something you've always strived to do. But in doing that, you neglect yourself.
Oh, yeah, because I'll be honest, I'm 28, so I'm just now being able to find out my fashions and my likes and what I like to do. Like, I learned that I like decorating for Halloween and things like that. And it's also like,
you can't like Halloween.
and not only liking Halloween, but I love Christmas, but like being able to find that
Sure.
and being able to feel happy always with myself, because as you've said, that is an area I've struggled with. It's the verse in the Bible to put others before yourself.
Yeah.
And I always put others before myself.
Sure.
But in doing so, like you said, I neglect myself because I don't know how to take that verse and be able to also give me time without feeling like I'm being arrogant.
Yeah.
I'm being selfish.
You feel guilty if you give any kind of time to yourself. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of where I'm like, that goes back to that 1 + 1 = 3 thing. It's like when you, this is gonna sound very preachy, and again, I've been diving into the word lately. Like I was telling Serena, I want to be at church every single day. Never felt that in my life, but I want to be at church every single day. But it's like when you give that time to God, and people always think giving time to God is like, well, I'm gonna pray every day, or I'm listening to worship music every day. No. You working on your craft, you working on whatever talent it is that you have, that is you giving time to God, and in turn you give time to yourself that way. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like the message at church on Sunday. Pastor James was like, he gave out this Starbucks gift card, $15.
Yeah.
And a lady went up there and grabbed it, and then he's like, now if you want to give it to somebody else, you can. And she pulled it out of her purse. She was very, well, yeah, I'll give it to somebody else. Yes. Give it to somebody else. She's like, okay, well, here's $30. Take this.
Yep.
In return. And then we leave service.
That card has passed its way.
It has gone to everybody.
And then to us.
And Travis walks up and he's like, hey, have this.
Have this.
And it makes its way to us. And you know what's crazy? I was able to use that card to get breakfast of some sort yesterday morning.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's that's kind of how it is like with those. You think that like, oh, I'm giving, oh, this is not time for me, it's time for God. But giving time to God turns around and he gives that time back to you. And so that's just kind of where I'm like, I know I'm everywhere, but we're very selfish with our time. And
Barry says he's very selfish.
Very selfish with time. And the thing is, you can still do the things you want to do and not be selfish with your time. And you have the opposite problem, like you said. You don't give yourself enough time.
Yeah.
And in turn, in my eyes, is like you're not giving enough time for you and God. It's more of like everybody else. I got to help everybody else. Mm-hmm. You say have a kind heart and like a generous heart. And God is like, yeah, but what about me?
Me.
What about me?
You and me, bro. It's like a trampoline that's stretched thin that you're like, I can't support my own weight.
Yeah, it's like, where do you find that balance? And see, I'm the opposite. Like, I love helping people. I love talking to people, but I also want to work. I also want to get my stuff done. And lately I've been feeling like I've been helping people out, and I'm just like, I just want to record a song. I just want to record one song. But yeah, no, it just, I just know, going back to it, you and I feel stronger and happier that we've gone back. You can yawn into the mic. You yawn into the mic.
I don't want to. Can I send me your water?
Yes.
Thank you.
But yeah, I think that's a good start for us. I think, we haven't shared everything, but we have shared a lot. Like, I'm sure you didn't expect to come onto this show and hear within like the first 15 minutes that I took a knife to the chest. Come to find out, it's a bread knife. But that's when you're away from the Spirit, when God is not with you fully, because you've not given yourself fully to Him, the enemy can get in.
You're like, oh, there's a crack. I'm gonna use that, man.
The enemy can get in. Yeah, like
it's like a roach.
There was a song I wrote a few years ago for Serena, about Serena, called "After All," and I swear to this day, a lot of those songs I wrote during that time period, even though we weren't going to church and we were struggling with faith, I believe to this day that God's the one who wrote those songs. I didn't write them. I was the vessel, and I still believe that with a lot of the shows that I write. Is like, I don't think that I'm writing them. I think I'm here, I'm typing, but
it's like the Bible is like, I knew I wrote it, but I don't know what I wrote.
Yeah, I don't know. they say man wrote the Bible, and and we talked about this too. This is a side note. Bible's from a certain perspective. There's a book that was released for Star Wars called From a Certain Point of View, and it was everybody's opinions and perspectives of Luke Skywalker. And that's kind of, it's like these different things that Luke had done, but they're from certain characters' point of view. There's a chapter that's all from R2's point of view.
Oh, okay.
And so my point with that is these different books in the Bible, especially the New Testament, they're all written from different authors. I know Paul wrote majority of them. Boy, Paul, the original Hamilton,
Long-winded.
was he wrote majority of the New Testament, but those that weren't written by him, I look at the Gospels at first, and it's like they're from 4 different people's perspectives.
That's kind of interesting.
Well, they are. Yeah. They're all the same story, just told from different points of view. In my Bible, it breaks down what each book is about, or how you could read each book. And it says Luke is very much a musical. It's a Broadway musical. And then if you read Mark, it's an action movie.
Okay.
Or it's either Mark or John. And I'm like, this is interesting.
That is really interesting.
And Matthew is the most boring to me. The beginning of Matthew is...
What's the introduction? No offense. Sometimes the introduction is like, blah.
I guess so. But when I think of an introduction, I think of like a long time ago.
In a galaxy far,
not that far. But like just more like the beginning of Transformers, or Optimus like goes into the backstory.
Oh, yeah.
No, Matthew's over there being like, yo, Abraham had Isaac, and Isaac had so-and-so. David had so-and-so. We go through the whole bloodline. And finally we get to Jesus.
He's like, we got to go through the genealogy.
Matthew should have been called genealogy. Genealogy should have been the book.
Should have been.
It should have been the book. But yeah, no, I think that's the main thing is knowing. I think a successful marriage is a couple that knows that they aren't perfect and that they can't do it alone.
Yeah, it's what I always tell you about, like, so if a marriage between 2 people is supposed to be 100%, then you need to be putting in 100% of that 50 to make that 100%.
Sure.
And I know, like, a lot of people get lost. It's like, but you have to be your all for that half to work.
Yeah.
Because if you're not, you're only giving 50, well then you're only giving 25%.
It's something that, and I know I made fun of him earlier, but it's something Will Smith said one time. I know he's not the person to go to for relationship advice, because Lord knows I do not agree with him and Jada, but I look up to him as a person, and I know people are going to be like, boo, you shouldn't, but he has a lot of good thoughts. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that he said one time is your partner is not who's going to make you happy.
Right.
You have to be happy with yourself. You have to be 100% you. And then they come in as 100% them. And that's how that works.
Mm-hmm.
And
sounds like the finale.
There's no way. It's only 9:30, I guess. So, yeah. It just got dark, though. But, like, I think there's something to be said to that, and I do agree that it is, you got to be, it's not 200%, but it's a full 100%.
Mm-hmm.
I'm 100%, you're 100%, and together we're 100%.
Yeah.
But it's not 50-50.
Yeah. It's just, that's how my brain sees it.
Sure.
It's like, you know, I'm not a math person, but it's like that makes sense in my head.
Yeah.
And no. I know, you know.
It's the way I look at it, and I know you're not a huge Dragon Ball fan, but it's the fusion thing. It's a fusion dance. You know, it's 100. You have to be full Goku, full Vegeta, and you have to meet exactly the right way to become one.
Yeah.
And in real life, in my opinion, the way to do that is for us, it's faith. It's having God. And I know there are people who don't fully believe in God, or at least the Christian way of God. I've got a friend who is agnostic. That's what he was telling me yesterday. And he's like, I believe there's a higher power. Mm-hmm. I just don't think it's the way that it's painted to be, that people make God to be. And
is it Brandon with an A?
No.
No,
No, Brandon with an A is Christian.
but yeah, he believes that Christ is the God above gods.
It's a old, so it's very close to old mentality of, so the founding fathers believed in God, but there's a word for it. But they don't believe God has really much to do with us. God created us and was like, all right, cool. There's some water, there's some food. See ya. It just bounced. Yeah. And that's kind of how the founding fathers believe, is that there's a God, but he got nothing to do with us. We do our own thing.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what Brandon with an A believes.
That's fair.
No. This is my buddy Dalton from work. I invited him to church. He said, "Oh, we don't really do church around here." He said, "I mean, I believe, he's I'm willing to learn whatever. If you want to teach me about God, I'm more than willing to learn about it." Mm-hmm. But I don't agree with the way that he's been painted. I believe there is a God, or a higher power. But I just don't agree with the way that
the people have portrayed. Yes. Because that is, what's weird? Kind of tying it together, it's a very different feeling. I know you make fun of me because I used to be Baptist.
I don't make fun of you. I just have a hard time. I have been neglected by the Baptist church, so that's where I have a hard time with it.
Not all Baptists are great, but I'm a Baptist. I have certain Baptist beliefs, but not all of them. I'm more spiritually faithful, but it's a very different vibe when we go back home to Georgia and when we come up here. Down there, we can talk about it, we can talk to people, and it's like a conversation.
Well, they're Southern Baptist. We're in the Midwest.
Well, Justin is Methodist, so
yeah, and he even said the other day that they're very old school on things.
Yeah.
But they're open-minded. They just they just like the way that they do old school worship.
Yeah.
And that's what he was talking about, old school worship. But if we're talking about the rest of the crew down there, they're Southern Baptists. That's who they are. Southern Baptists is different than Midwest Baptists. Midwest Baptists are they're very political. They're
kind of cutthroat.
They're very by the book. And if you're not a member of the church, we ain't got time for you.
Yeah.
And the thing is, I love Baptists. There's a lot of people outside of leaders of the church that I know who are Baptists, and they're some of the nicest, kindest people that I know. So it's not that I'm bashing Baptists. It's Baptist churches and leadership have never, ever made me feel welcome. And I know for sure they've never made you feel welcome.
Oh, yeah. What's worse is that I was in a Baptist church back home, and I was never fully welcomed, and then I get to churches up here that I'm shunned for. It's people, and that's the problem. Going back to it, it's people that are the problem, not God. Because kind of going to the Encounter movie, he's like, well, then what about the people who've blown up abortions and blown up people?
And he's like, I never asked anyone to do that.
People have done that, and it's like, guys, we have free will. And I still, to this day, I use the example of Men in Black 3. God is. He is omnipotent and he's omniscient, but he can't make the decision for us because we have free will, but he knows every outcome of every past, future, and present choice.
Right. He knows every road that you're going to take, every decision.
And he can help line that up with what you pray for, but he can't. He can make it happen, but he can't make it happen unless you do something.
Yeah, it's the multiverse theory, but with Christ, it's like God can see all the different outcomes. I think of Flash. I don't want to spoil anything for people, but it's like rather than doing parallel universes, it's like intersecting universes, and like our choices affect how our world's gonna go or how our lives are gonna go, but God knows before we're even born. The outcomes and decisions that we're going to make, but he intervenes when we ask him to, or when somebody asks him to on our behalf. But until that happens,
you gotta keep digging until he does it.
Well, but until you realize that God is there and God is going to help you, you're going to just be lost. And you're going to take whatever road and avenue you can. Going back to Encounter, the Encounter movie by Pureflix, Sting's character followed the devil. He didn't even know he was following the devil. And he went down this road that...
Yeah, that was dangerous.
Yeah.
And then, you know what's worse is, like, he saw the devil as the sheriff, but he saw him, like, what rockers would use, like, that
the devil horns. Yeah, the devil horns.
The devil horns. And he was like, okay, yeah, cool. And I was like, bro, how the alarm's not going off?
Right. Well, and that was the thing about that character. He was so stubborn and stuck in his ways that he was afraid to admit that God is right in front of me saying, hey, man, here's a steak. Here's what you want.
I can give you
I can give you everything that you want, dude. All you have to do is admit it. Your grandma's been praying for you for years. And he's like, no.
No.
Yeah.
Thanks, but no.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
But no, it's just... And I was kind of going on with my own solo podcast too about this, is that there's a really bad misconception in the world about faith and what it is to be a Christian, because there are Christians who are still stuck back in the day where like they're not willing to move forward, and like that's the thing, and you gotta look at it as a battlefield, even though because right now we are in a... This went from being about marriage to just about faith, but that's okay. We're in a constant battle with each other. We are in a civil war with each other. Maybe not for like country or really for power. We're always going to be for that.
We're in a spiritual civil war.
We are in a very much a spiritual civil war. There are people in this world who want to be themselves, who feel like they're being themselves, who are there's a whole lot of new stuff happening in culture, and the thing is, we're not prepared for it. And when I say we, I mean Christians, followers of God, trying to help other people and shepherd other people. We are not built for that because we have not been trained to evolve to what the enemy is bringing out.
But a person can.
A person can, yeah.
And that is a big misconception, is that we as people are screwing up.
Yes.
But we as a person, as you and I, we can evolve.
Right. And that's what it comes down to at the end of the day, I think, with faith is... I jump back to what I was reading earlier today, and I was reading from The Real Force. I was reading from that devotional, and it kept going back to Psalms, and it kept saying that you'll receive God's love when you fear him. And I hate that. I hate that. I hate saying hate, but I dislike saying hate. But the thing is, God, at one point in time, I think early on, did work off fear. That's why he was very like wrathful, and that's why he did flood the earth. And he was like, look, we're having a do-over. Noah, build that ark, get as much as you can on there. I'm hitting the backspace. We're redoing all of this.
He's like, I'm gonna backspace everything.
I messed up with Adam. It didn't work out. I thought we could do it. No, take it back.
Take it back. All back. But then the flood happens. I don't mean to cut you off.
No, you're fine.
But like the flood happens, right? And then Noah, his family, they spread out on the earth, and then it happens again. And he's like, what is the problem?
Yep.
Why can't this be fixed? And he's like, well, it's because I don't understand my own creation.
Right.
So he had to send a version of
years down the road. He was like, okay, this is what I got to do. And then but even when he was down here, he was like, why y'all lazy, man?
Why y'all do this?
I think about the one we were reading about last week, where he went to go pray, and the disciples kept falling asleep. But he's like, yo, wake up. Why y'all falling asleep?
And then they're like, Jesus, we're sorry. We're just tired. We'll stay awake. We promise.
And they fell asleep. And he's like, why are you falling asleep?
And then the third time, he's just like, okay, I'm going to give up. I don't want
fine,
to.
Sleep,
because tomorrow, here comes the traitor.
Yeah.
That's pretty much what happened.
And it's just funny. Like, if you think about it, we talk about this too, people put Jesus on a pedestal. He was the perfect human. But you have to think about how it was at that time. He had anxieties, he had fears, he had frustrations. Yeah. He was living with 12 people at one time who didn't get it.
Who's like, help me. He
had a mini me in Peter. He had a doubting follower in Thomas.
Yeah.
And it's like the rest of them, he had to like. When he found Matthew was a tax collector at the temple.
He's like,
and Matthew looks right at him. It's like, oh God,
it's Jesus.
It's Jesus. Starts crying. He's like, bro, it's okay. Come here.
Just come with me. I mean,
they make it so like we go back to perspective. They make it seem so regal. Like he's like, come with me and sin no more. But I can see Jesus being like, another one, great. Okay, come on, let's go.
It kind of reminds me of is it Zacchaeus? Mateus?
Zacchaeus,
and he's like, Zacchaeus.
Yeah,
he's
come
like, bro,
down.
He's like, bro, I'm 5 foot. I gotta get in this tree.
Yeah.
I'm gonna see him.
Yeah.
And he's struggling.
And he's like, come down.
He's like, hey, just come down here. It's fine. He probably got a bird nest on him.
Yeah.
He's got, animals, got scratches,
yeah.
and probably fell out of the tree.
That's a great example, though. Like, you bring up Zacchaeus, because that was, at Peace Chapel, Wes used that as an example, but in a different way.
Oh.
Here we are saying, like, Jesus is like, man, just get down here.
Just come down.
Which I think would be funny. I know people be offended, but like to see Kevin Hart play Jesus just in an SNL skit, I think I would be happy.
Funny, because I feel like it'd be so accurate. Again, like you said, the Bible is written, like you said earlier, God writes through you. He writes through everyone.
Yeah.
And everyone has their own version of how they make things. Like, you're a different version of Tyler Perry in a way.
Yeah.
So it's like, it makes sense that, they wouldn't have had the skills to make humor. That sounds mean.
Right.
But they wouldn't have.
Right, because that wasn't their kind of humor. But I do think that like his frustrations were very like they were human. He was a human.
Mm-hmm. He also had half siblings. He had a stepfather.
Yeah.
Like, he had real problems.
He was a carpenter. He probably hit himself with a hammer a few times. He probably almost let some words come out he didn't want people to hear. Anyways, going back to it, Wes did a sermon about Zacchaeus, but about going above, because Zacchaeus had to rise above the crowd to see Jesus because he wanted to see him so bad.
He was also short too.
Well, but it was like he climbed and rose above everybody else to see Jesus, and he used that as an example to go above and beyond, and that kind of goes back to what I'm saying is. The only way we're going to spread the love of God and the only way we're going to win this civil war that's happening, opposite.
I know.
The only way we're going to do that is if we go above and we do better and we learn and we see what the enemy is doing and we combat it with
love, because that's
in a greater way. Fear does not work. And God learned fear does not work.
That's why he rewrote the commandments in the New Testament. It's like, love thy neighbor as thyself, love me, and love yourself.
Right. Fear does not work. And again, I apologize. This is our first one. This is all free form. We got off on a spiritual tangent there, but
going back to it as part of our marriage, I am more than happy that I'm married to you, even though we have our ups and downs. I think that helps me break down walls without having to rebuild them.
Sure. And
have a safe space and a safe partner to do that with.
Yeah.
I don't feel like a lot of people think about that in that way. And that's something we talked about too, is we use the D word, which is divorce. My mom was divorced before my father, and then she was a widowed common law marriage.
My mom was divorced 3 times.
So, and it's not ideal, it's part of it is like, don't get a divorce. And that's something that we've talked about.
Don't do it.
It kind of goes back to the lesson we read today with Tamala and David. Divorce was just off the table for them. And for us, I won't say it was the same level of off the table, but it definitely was off the table. And now, when, like, the mean side comes out or we're having a tired fight, that word will come up and be like, well, we'll just get a divorce. And then we'll calm down. It's like, I'm sorry. I don't mean to. And I think...
And they're stupid petty fights, too.
They are. And it's stuff that you probably need to talk about and say, hey, I am feeling a certain kind of way. And also being with you, I've learned that words are very hard for me. So, as someone who translate for me for what I just said, because I could tell you that the sky is blue, but you will hear, well, the grass was green.
Yeah, your brain's saying one thing, but your mouth is saying something else.
And so you will translate that you know, for me. And I've gotten better, but I've also learned when it comes to talking with you and talking out loud that it's okay to text it out, write it out, because sometimes it's easier. And I think as married couples, we forget that like we have to be verbal. Communication is key. It is very...
Show us for eternity. Sorry.
No, I was thinking it too. But it's very key. But I think we forget that we have to communicate. And sometimes communication can be... I know I send you sometimes the memes, but it's like the girl is like on her phone and she's mad. And they're like on Instagram and he's on his phone. But they send each other like hearts that they love each other. Yeah. It's going to sound dumb, but it's the little things that matter. So it's the communication pieces. You could even write a letter, you know. It's just being able to express that and feel okay with that too.
It's like the episode of Big Bang we just got done watching.
Yeah,
like,
it is.
Penny felt neglected, and Leonard was like, "What do you mean? I'm the one who's put all the work in this relationship."
And she's like, "Well, that's not what I'm talking about."
Yeah.
And
so they had to get a freaking contract,
a relationship agreement, and you know, Sheldon was all too happy to write it. Yeah. It's like it shouldn't have to come down to that. And
well, that's the thing, though. When you get married, marriage is a contract.
It is.
And
there are rules and things that you kind of need to abide by, but you have to abide by them together.
But that's what your vows are. Like, your vows are that contract. I mean, I'm not saying you sign the... I'm not talking about the license. I'm talking about you make your vows, and your vows are your promise to each other. And we learned that. You know, last year we had our vow renewal, and we had to re-promise things to each other or fix things that we had messed up. And
that also goes with, like, changing, which is why we did our revows. And I think a lot of couples forget to honor that, like, you've been high school sweethearts forever, but you've probably changed. You know, I won't say you've went through a midlife crisis, but you've had trauma, you've had this, you've had another mountain,
You're a different person, especially if you've been married for a while. You're a different person than where you were when you got married. And if you're not willing to change together, then that's when it becomes a problem, which goes back to what I was saying earlier about changing because of the enemy. But that's why our wedding was the way it was. We picked Doctor Who because Doctor Who is all about change.
And that's why David Tennant is my least favorite Doctor.
He's my favorite.
Matt Smith is mine. But like the fact that when we first watched it, and then I saw, because we watched Matt and then we went back and watched Tennant, like I saw how upset he was when he was like, "This is my last time that I'm gonna see anything."
He was very vain.
Very vain. He's like, "I don't want to go yet," and it felt like that. Like,
you were so mad. You're like, "He's such a baby."
And then I'm over here about like 3 weeks after that episode, bawling my eyes out to you and saying like, "I don't want to go."
Yeah.
And I felt like it was honestly, it was like the old me. It was like, "I don't want to go because this is the last time I'm gonna see you in this form." And it kind of goes back to getting a divorce, though, is like, I never like it when parents, and I know there are reasons why, but I never like it when parents are like, we've been together so long, so I feel obligated to. Sure. If you feel obligated to get married, that's a problem. If the word even is even in the vocabulary, that's a problem.
Yeah. That's a problem.
That's a problem. That's a problem. And I don't think it's fair, because then eventually you'll bring children into that mix, and then it becomes really messy and muggy and muddy. And I'm not saying that as a person, you know, I'm not sitting here shaking my finger at you, but I know that for us, that's not something we would want to do, which is why, like, maybe another episode why we don't want to have children right now.
We'll get into that eventually. But I do think we've kind of covered a lot. We've recorded for like an hour.
I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. Well, I went on a tangent about faith, but we turn it back around. But really, at the end of the day, I am happy that I am with you and that we get to walk this journey together, and that we are finally taking the right steps, I think, for our marriage and for our health.
Yes.
Well, I don't mean our physical health, but I mean just our spiritual health.
Because that's been a part of it too, is not so much demon possessions, but spiritual possessions of other people and their emotions. And that's had an impact on our marriage, and being able to bless those spirits and give them peace and send them back and have you bless me, bless over me and say, you know, be blessed be, but peace out. You got to go. This ain't your home, homie. You know, having...
You got to go home, but you can't stay here.
Yeah. So I agree with you.
I think that's what we'll probably end it for here. But thank you guys for watching.
Yeah.
I don't know if this one will be daily. I don't know if you want to do it daily or at least once a week. But we'll be back with more.
We'll do once a week, maybe.
So anyways, we'll see you guys later.
Bye.
Bye.